Okay, so today we are going to talk about testing. I just gave my first Stanford 10 test. This is not the first Stanford 10 test that my children have taken, but this is the first one that I have administered and proctored. And so because of that, we are going to talk about my experience, what I felt went well, and things that I really wish I would have done differently. Yes, let's go ahead and jump into the video and let's talk about it. My name is Amanda from Learning to Love Well, and this is a channel all about homeschool, and particularly from a biblical worldview. I am a Bible-believing Christian. I love the Lord, and because of that, it should filter into every part of our lives, including homeschool. So we talk about everything from the practical to biblical encouragement to scriptural reasons why we do things, and on top of that, we will talk about sometimes biblical encouragement, and sometimes we'll just talk about things that have to do with being a mom who homeschools. And so, yes, today we are going to be talking about the Stanford 10 test. I think that sometimes when we are testing and doing things, especially new, sometimes it's nice to just hear experiences from others. I know that just having the ability to hear about someone else's experience, get the understanding of what it looked like for them, can be so incredibly helpful for us because it lets us know, one, we're not alone. 2, we can do this. 3, learn from lived experiences from others. And 4, feel a little bit more confident and a little bit more ready for whatever we're undertaking. Now, if you have never taken a test before, the Stanford 10 test definitely does look intimidating, okay? So proctoring it, you are required to have a bachelor's degree in order to administer the Stanford 10 test. And this year I administered the Stanford 10 test to 5 children, 4 of my own and 1 other homeschooler. It was a lot. I think we had a total of 29 subtests in total between all 5 children. Now that might sound like a lot, but it actually went really well. There are some things I wish I would have done different, like I said, and we'll talk about that at the end of the video. But for starters, I'm going to talk about what went really well. Number 1 is, by God's grace, 3 of the children could test together. BJU Press was really nice to send a beautiful little blue of the test and how you should fill out the bubble sheets and the demographics. And then on the sheet, it actually gave you a chart of what tests you could give together. And I had 3 children taking intermediate 1, intermediate 2, and intermediate 3. And this went phenomenally well. There was only 3 tests out of those tests that could not be tested together, which was the listening skills and the word study, and one of them was taking an LSAT. So these could not be administered together. But I tell you, the fact that I could knock out 3 tests at the same time was awesome. And when I say 29 subtests, I'm not discluding. I counted the 3 that could test together as one test. So we did have quite a lot of subtests, but by God's grace, we made it through it, and we made it through it in a week, in 5 days timing, in a school week's timing. We started on a Wednesday. We went Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We did not test on Saturday and Sunday. And then we did Tuesday and Wednesday. So yeah, 29 subtests, 1 proctor, 5 kids. It went really well. Another thing that went super well was I had a lovely couple from my church came over and actually watched my kids on the first day of testing. Hi to the German math teacher. I will say this, super cool. It helped immensely, especially my first day of testing. The kids were a little bit more rambunctious and a little bit more hectic than usual. And so this couple was so gracious and sweet to come over and help my kids settle down so that I could proctor the test for my other child who was currently testing. Now, the way that we did our subtests was I would call in one level or one child, or I would call in the 3 children who were testing together. And they would sit down, we would go through the test like instructed, and then we would close they would finish their test, they would close their books, and then they would swap out with another kid, and then the next kid would come and test and do their subtest. We did that for those days. And some days I was just going back to back to back to back. Like, I would have my tiny tot come, then the 3 come test, and then my older son come and test, and then we would just swap them out. It was quite a bit of reading on the listening, like on some of the tests, depending if they're dictated or not dictated. But what I will say is going back to back and knocking them out was great because we didn't go 2 weeks testing or longer. So I would totally do that again in the future. And again, having another person there to at least at the beginning of testing was awesome. Now, on a couple other days, my husband was home, so that also helped. But even by the end of the week, the kids were in the flow, and they ended up doing really well with just me here. So like I said, especially at the beginning of testing, if you can have someone come in and just kind of help your kids, and obviously depending on what age, if you have really, really young kids, you might want that the entirety of testing. But I actually have some older children and one younger child, and so that really helped. Okay, another thing that went well was we kept our school supplies and all the tests in one box. So I went ahead and pulled all of the testing supplies, stuck them in the box. The things that we needed, I did have to pick up new calculators because we could not find our calculators for whatever reason. I still can't find my calculators, and I just went through my whole homeschool closet. So there must be some calculators missing. You know what I'm saying? But we did pick up some new calculators, and we stuck all the number 2 pencils, my highlighters, my testing sheets, and everything in that one box, and that was like my box testing station. So whenever the box came out, so did the pencils, so did the rulers, so did all the stuff that was needed for those tests. And it just made it easier during testing days because I wasn't re-scrambling for pencils. I wasn't re-scrambling for anything. It was all in that test box. So that worked out really well. I will say the Stanford 10 is very precise on how they want you to administer it. So they have a very set amount of rules, what you're supposed to say, what you're not supposed to say. They do tell you to keep it like a classroom setting, which is pretty cool, to where, you know, you can not make it so heavy when it's testing. But, you know, obviously you want to make sure you're following ethical rules and you're not helping children or, you know, being like, don't answer that like that. You know, like, obviously you don't want to do that. So practice your poker face, mom. Like, I will tell you, like, super, super hard sometimes when you're like, just don't look at the test. Just don't look at the test. That might work. But yes, so testing went pretty well. So things that I wish would have gone better. This is where I tell on myself. We ate out way more than normal during testing. I think don't judge me, okay? We totally went and grabbed Taco Bell like 3 times, I think, during that week. One morning I picked up Bojangles, and then the other time we picked up pizza. Now, the pizza was partially because I had an errand to run right after testing, and then after that errand, I didn't get home until really late. But yeah, we went out to eat a lot. And that is not something that my family does. So we tend to be very, you know, like homemade, from scratch kind of cooking. But during testing, this was not possible. I did find that when I was testing for most of the day and trying to knock out tests, and just how many calories children consume during testing, even with an extra grocery run, eating out, having leftover pizza, and kind of having stuff, and tons of fruit. I mean, like, we had like bags of nectarines. We had 4 bunches of bananas that disappeared in like 3 days. Like, it is amazing how much food kids can put away during that time. If I were to do it again in the future, I would probably take like 2 or 3 days to meal prep snacks, to like high protein snacks for the children, because I had 5 children in my house testing all day long. Sometimes the test didn't end until like 5:30. And so, yes, I would say that in the future, probably having crock pot meals ready to go and having a ton of like homemade protein bars, or even if I went and bought store-bought protein bars and things like that, just having a ton of snacks on hand so that when my children got hungry, when they all wanted to eat or anything else, they would have had plenty of things to kind of grab and go, rather than having to stop and go pick something up or even making something homemade. So in the future, if I test again, if we don't switch back to my friend testing, I will probably want to do some meal prep ahead of time. And I mean like massive mama meal prep kind of stuff. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen Large Family Table with Jamarelle Stewart, but I'm talking about like her kind of meal prep, because we went through some food quick and in a hurry during testing. Another thing that I wish that would have gone well, I'm actually going to tell on myself, make sure you read the directions before you bubble in any of the bubble sheets. Amanda, I may or may not have jumped the gun on one, and praise God it was only one bubble. Be wiser than me. Another thing that I will say that could have gone better was, one of the things that I think could have gone better is some of the instructions in the test booklets when I was testing all three, some of them did not line up 100%. So even though it said I could test together, there was a couple of sub-tests that didn't line up perfectly. So what I would do again in the future was I would read through the subtext to make myself aware of that before I ever administered the test. Because while administering the test, trying to kind of figure that out at the same time kind of did take a little bit more brain work and a little bit more time in the test itself, because I was trying to figure out how to give directions to 3 different tests. Even though they were supposed to line up, they did not line up 100%. So I had to like direct, like, you're on this page, you're on this page, you're on this page, because they were different in the directions and in the test booklet. So what I would say is that if you are planning on testing things that can be testable together, is just to go ahead and check how that differs through the pages, and maybe make a little post-it note and stick it by the test booklet that you're reading out of to note any changes that are coming. And then that way you're not trying to figure out how to do that verbatim and stick to the directions during the test. Although it did work out fine, I think to have that flow would have been a lot better. And I think that it would have been a little bit more easygoing and a little less stress during the test. So with that being said, this is my first time, like I said, administering the Stanford 10 test. I'm posting this video for moms who are interested or are planning to give this test, to just have a little bit of background of things that could help a little bit better for your testing. Maybe you can learn from my mistakes. And yes, just kind of have that in the back of your mind so that when you are going in for the test, you can feel a little bit more confident and kind of have someone who has already done the test. So with that being said, logging off. I'm going to try to edit this video again. And then I am going to, Lord willing, go to sleep. Actually, I'm going to finish my exercises and then I'm going to go to sleep. You guys have a great night. God bless, and have a nice night.